This is Plant-Based Briefing, how U.S. taxpayers bailed out the poultry industry and helped entrench avian flu, Part 2 by Grey Moran at sentientmedia.org. And I'm Marian Erickson. This is the Plant-Based Podcast where I curate and narrate, with permission, a variety of articles on plant-based and vegan living in about 10 minutes or less every weekday. And today's article is longer than that, so it's a two-parter. Go back and listen to yesterday's first, and then jump back here for the second half. So now let's get to today's Plant-Based Briefing. How U.S. taxpayers bailed out the poultry industry and helped entrench avian flu, Part 2 by Grey Moran at sentientmedia.org. Too indemnified to fail, how payments can incentivize risk. The indemnity system was designed to incentivize producers to adopt practices that help curb the spread of the virus. As APHIS states, the payments are intended to encourage prompt reporting of certain high-consequence livestock and poultry diseases and to incentivize private biosecurity investment. Biosecurity measures include a range of practices to prevent disease outbreaks, from latching dumpster lids and disinfecting equipment to more expensive measures like installing netting and screens on barns to deter wild birds. These biosecurity measures are especially critical given that H5N1 is most commonly introduced to poultry flocks through wild birds, according to a 2023 epidemiology analysis conducted by APHIS. The virus's transmission from wild birds can happen either directly or indirectly through contaminated feed, clothing, and equipment. By sheltering producers from risk, researchers have observed that indemnity payouts can, under some circumstances, inadvertently encourage lapses in biosecurity, enabling the spread of disease. And this can potentially create a system where farms are too indemnified to fail. The risks of operating a business highly susceptible to disease are absorbed by the government. What we are finding is that unconditional indemnity disincentivizes livestock producers to adopt biosecurity because they know that if the disease strikes their system, then they would be indemnified. Asim Zia, professor of public policy and computer science at the University of Vermont, who researches livestock disease risk, tells Sentient. According to Zia, unconditional indemnity means indemnity payouts with next to no requirements to qualify. It remains to be seen whether APHIS's new interim guidelines, which will require that some high-risk producers successfully pass a biosecurity audit prior to receiving indemnity, will be enough to remedy this issue and encourage producers to change. Unlike the previous system, the new audits will include a visual inspection of the premises, either virtually or in person. However, the scope of the new rule is limited to large-scale commercial poultry facilities that have been previously infected with HPAI, or that are moving poultry onto a poultry farm in a buffer zone, a higher-risk region. Other large-scale commercial facilities will still follow the earlier rule's more lenient audit process. This requires an audit of a producer's biosecurity plan on paper, not an inspection of the actual poultry farm every 2 years. It has been remarkably easy for farmers to pass this audit. The failure rate of the program was 0, according to APHIS, which made it so there were effectively no strings attached to the payouts. And smaller-scale poultry operations are entirely off the hook, exempt from both rules, and even from developing a biosecurity plan. In the past, APHIS has repeatedly bailed out many of the same poultry businesses, spending $227 million on indemnity payments to farms that have been infected with H5N1 multiple times. This has included 67 poultry businesses that have been infected at least twice, and 19 companies that have been infected at least 3 times, according to the agency's own records. APHIS has not released the names of the companies that have been repeatedly infected, though the indemnity payments provide a glimpse into this. Take Cal-Maine Foods poultry farm in Farewell, Texas. On April 2, 2024, Texas's Commissioner of Agriculture, Sid Miller, announced its flock tested positive for H5N1, requiring the culling of 1.6 million laying hens and 337,000 pullets. The very next day, Cal-Maine Foods, headquartered in Mississippi, received an indemnity payment of $17 million for HPAI detected on the Texas operation, according to government spending data. The poultry industry's risky expansion. Last November, Cal-Maine Foods executives joined other business leaders across industries at an annual investment conference, ringing in the year on an optimistic note. As avian flu decimated flocks, the company's top executives were focused on the future. We still think there's going to be good opportunity to grow, Max Bowman, Cal-Maine Foods Vice President and CFO, told business leaders. We got a playbook for the whole market, and so right now things are great, but we think we can continue to build this company, which as it stands controls 1/5 of the domestic egg market in the U.S. The company is already in the process of building 5 new cage-free facilities, adding 1 million hens to their flock in Florida, Georgia, Utah, and Texas. Bowman, Cal-Maine's vice president, did not reply to Sentient's request for comment. Other poultry companies are expanding too. For instance, Demler Farms in San Jacinto, California is building a triple-story egg operation right next to a dairy farm, which is also susceptible to the avian flu now that it has spread to cattle. Adding to this risk, the San Jacinto Valley is a critical habitat for migratory water birds, the primary hosts of avian flu. Most of California's cases of avian flu in poultry have been clustered along this waterbird migratory route, known as the Pacific Flyway. Yet this appears to not be enough of a deterrent for Demler Farms' expansion. As Heath observed, this risk is softened by the indemnity payment system, ready to bail out infected poultry farms by the millions. You just listened to How U.S. Taxpayers Bailed Out the Poultry Industry and Helped Entrench Avian Flu, Part 2 by Grey Moran at sentientmedia.org. And I'm your host, Marian Erickson. I've done a number of other episodes about avian flu and ventilation shutdown plus. I will link those in the show notes, but I've also done a gazillion about eggs and how cruel the egg industry is and how unhealthy eggs are for you. But people don't know the truth. They don't know, or they don't care. But wherever you listen, search for egg in the search field and all those will come up, and I will link some specific ones about avian flu and ventilation shutdown plus in the show notes, including 970 Why Raw Milk Isn't Safe, especially considering bird flu, 881 Alternative Proteins' Place on the Global Health Agenda, 831 U.S. Farm Workers Advocates Call for Greater Protections as Bird Flu Spreads, 815 Bird Flu Highlights the Problems with Factory Farming, 785 Bird Flu Infects Dairy Cows and Farm Worker in the U.S., 728 When Tyson depopulates chickens, taxpayers are left footing the bill, 476 Censorship concerns and veterinary profession should not condone killing animals by heat stroke, VSD+, 393 The use of chickens in agricultural research, an eye-opening look at unspeakable cruelty, 391 The connection between deadly pandemics and our diets, 157 How concentrated animal feeding operations fuel pandemics, bonus one, Go vegan or risk another pandemic, and then another one about Crystal Heath herself and how her organization is the target of a smear campaign, 684 CEW's smear campaign against animal protection groups. So please share this episode with anyone who might benefit, and thanks for listening.